another tutorial video. Today's one is in conjunction with Tonic Stamp Club number 29, which is called A Bug Deal. And you've got all sorts of gorgeous elements in here that you will have seen in yesterday's up close video. I'll have gone through all of these different stamps and the coordinating dies that go with them, and then the extra dies that are in there too. But for this tutorial, it's another shaker card tutorial, but it's a different one showing you how you can suspend like die cut and stamped elements within your shaker, so they don't like sort of go upside down or flip round the wrong way or anything. They'll actually be suspended. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the jar that's in here and the little firefly that's in here as well, and we're actually going to have suspended fireflies inside the jar, so there'll be shaker elements in the actual jar aperture, but then there will also be invisible thread with the fireflies on as well, so they'll sort of like wiggle around and move in there, but then there'll also be stuff shaking around in there as well. So I thought it was a different sort of take on a shaker card that you might not have seen before, or maybe you have seen before but you just never tried it before and you want to give it a go, so it might sort of encourage you to see how simple it is to do. So it's in conjunction with Stamp Club 29, so if you do want to get hold of the Stamp Club, I will have the affiliate link in the description box below the video and on my blog post as well. But first of all, for this card, I've got everything ready, so hopefully this will make it like a simpler video, mainly just focusing on the actual, you know, putting together of the shaker. So what I've got my sentiment ready, and I've just got a scrap of yellow card that I'm going to stick it onto and cut round. I have got an extra magnifying glass because I had one left over from another card that I was making, so I'm not sure if I'm going to put this on here yet. We'll see what it looks like when it's finished, but I was thinking you could have the magnifying glass coming into the side as well, because the sentiment that I've picked is enjoy the little things in life, and you know, magnifying glasses make the little things look bigger. Then you're also going to need a piece of acetate to be the front of your shaker. You're also going to need 5 blanks of the fireflies, so just cutting them out with the die just to get the blanks of them. Then you're also going to need 5 of your coloured fireflies, and I have actually, we won't be able to tell in the video because the sun's out, but I have actually used the banana split glow in the dark neon Nuvo drops on the bottoms of them, so if you looked at this card in the dark, hopefully their bottom areas would glow like a real firefly. Hopefully that will kind of work in the dark. I haven't actually sort of tested it out. I don't know if you can... Nah, you can't really see them glowing at the moment, but possibly when it's dark I'll be able to see them glowing. So I've got 5 of those. I always feel like odd numbers are nice to have. I've also got 3 of the little trails, which I thought we could just stick in the background as a little extra element in there too. And then for the main portion of the shaker, you kind of need one of these dies. A lot of the shaker dies that Tonic do, you could probably use for this kind of a technique. You know, they do the ones that have the blisters that go with them, but you don't always have to use the blister that goes with them. And the ones that have the extra outside edge are the perfect ones for these. So the way you do this is, you take the interior die and you cut that into your background panel. So this is your card piece that you want on the front of your card, and you cut the aperture into that, and you can get your positioning by placing the outside die onto your card and working out how far up or down the card you want it to be as well. And then you're just cutting the inside aperture into your card panel, but then you also want to use the inside aperture plus the outside edge of whichever shape you're using, whether it is this jar or a different one, to cut yourself a frame. So the frame will sit nicely around the edge of this, but because we have cut the aperture into this main panel, we now have all of this space to put our foam tape, rather than just putting a tiny skinny bit around this frame piece. We've got all of this area, so it's going to make it much easier to create a shaker card with that aperture on there. And adding the little jar on the top just makes it you know, look even more like a jar really. And then we've also got the lid in this die set as well, so we're going to put the lid on because we don't want the fireflies escaping, unless that could be part of the card. You could have one firefly. That might be cool actually. We could put the lid down the bottom and have one firefly escaping from it. Might do that instead actually. That's quite a good idea. And we could even do the little trail inside the jar, so it looks like he's escaping from there. And then we can have maybe enjoy the little things in life going across the middle rather than towards the top like I was originally planning. That might be quite cool actually. I'm glad I thought of that. yeah, so that's what we're going to be doing. And then as well as this, you're also going to want some kind of background to go behind your jar. So I thought, well, fireflies give off like a glowing yellow light. So I kept the ink pads out so I could tell you. I took French macaroon and sunrise yellow. I can't remember which two sets these light coloured inks were from, but I'm pretty sure they're fairly new. They're definitely not some of the original kind of colours. They're in the newer kind of packs of colours. But any sort of like light yellows, you could do this with ink blending. You can do it with your aquaflows, anything you want to really, just to add some like yellow glow. And then I just used some alcohol pens, the same ones I'd use to colour the fireflies, to add little dots in there as well. So when we put this all together, that will be the background behind there. Now, if you did want this background to be very specific of where the places are in there, I did touch on that on my channel shaker card tutorial video, but if there is, you know, like details about that you would want, that could also be a future shaker card tutorial showing you exactly how to, you know, line up a perfect scene inside something for a shaker card as well. But for this one, I just went with a generic background so that it's very easy to line up. We're mostly focusing on the hanging kind of elements in there. So with the shaker card, the first thing we want to do is prepare our shaker card panel here. So we're going to take the one we've cut the aperture into and we're going to turn it over. And then we're just going to use some double-sided tape. I often use double-sided tape and wet glue, so we'll add a little bit of wet glue on this as well, just to make sure it really stays stuck nicely. We're just putting that around the aperture on the back of the panel. And then we can remove the backing of the tape and then stick our piece of acetate onto there. And just place that into position. I didn't actually use any wet glue, did I? I just said I was going to. I was thinking about the next step. Anyway, you can use wet glue as well. So we've got our acetate on there now, on the panel. And then the next thing we want to do is create our initial shaker well around here. And because we're using die cut elements and because we want them to have enough room to move, and we're also putting shaker stuff in there as well, I'm going to go with a thicker foam tape. So this is like a 2mm one. You could go with a 3mm if you wanted to as well. I don't actually have any 3mm depth one, but I'm going to go 2mm depth. And we want to create a shaker well that goes all the way around the edge of our aperture. And we also want it to go around this top part as well, so that the card is supported when we actually, you know, put this all together. And we want this to be a continuous well as well, so that none of the little prills that we're going to be using in there will be able to escape, or if you're using microbeads they won't be able to escape then either. And we can add a skinnier piece along the bottom to fill this in. And cut that perfectly, that's amazing. So we'll add a couple more pieces up here just to fill this area in. We'll put that extra skinny piece up there, and then one more little piece to go in that area there. So now we've got the whole background portion filled with our foam tape. The next thing to get ready are all of the fireflies. So for this, we want, obviously we're going to keep one out, so let's keep the best one out. Which one looks the best? That one looks the best, I think. So we'll keep the best one out that's going to be flying out the top of the jar. And then we've got our other 4 to prepare. Now, I think it might be quite nice to have 2 of them on one string and then have the other 2 on individual strings. So we're going to set up 3 strings to go across the back of our shaker. And the way I like to do this kind of thing is you're going to take all of the real ones, so the coloured in ones that are going to be the front, and we're going to place them down. So this will be on one string, this is on another string, and the 2 of them are going to be on another string. And then I want to actually take some red liner tape, because I feel like the red liner tape really holds the invisible thread into position nicely. It's a really strong adhesive, and we're just going to put a little piece down the centre of the bodies of the fireflies, just so that we'll have somewhere for that invisible thread to stick onto. And we're actually going to sandwich this in a minute as well. When we've put the invisible thread on, we're going to sandwich it with more tape and put wet glue, and then put another die cut on the back of it as well. So invisible thread is just like it's just like a cotton reel. You can actually buy this. My mum uses it to make whiskers and things on some of the animals that she knits. You could use fishing line as well if you don't have invisible thread. The only thing is invisible thread is much thinner, so you can like really hardly see it at all, whereas fishing line is usually a bit thicker, so it's a little bit more noticeable. We don't need too long a length of this, because it's just a small shaker that we're using, but we want excess to be able to secure it really nicely on the top and bottom. So you're not really going to be able to see what I'm doing, but basically I'm pulling the thread out, making sure there's enough left at the top, and then I'm going to press it onto the body of the firefly. And then before that pings off or goes anywhere, or I lose where it's sticking to, I'm just going to take another piece of red liner tape and put that directly over the top to really sandwich it in. And then I'm going to take the next one, decide maybe I want it off at a quirky angle so they look a bit different, and then I'm going to push that one into the adhesive, or push the thread into the adhesive on the back of the second one. And again, put another piece of red liner tape over the top to sandwich that in position. And then we just want to repeat this with a similar kind of length of invisible thread. If you're like the first time you're making this, you can go on the excess sort of side with the thread. It doesn't matter if you've got too much. It matters more if you've done too short of a piece, but obviously, you know, depending on how big your roll is, you don't want to waste it too much. But the first one that you do, you might want to use longer pieces of thread than you think you might need, so that you're gonna have enough to wrap around. Because I always find with spinner cards in particular, I know this isn't actually a spinner card, but you do this similar technique for a spinner card. That's another idea for a tutorial actually. But with a spinner card, you often get like the droopy element in the middle because you haven't secured the thread tight enough on both ends. So what I like to do is wrap it around foam tape, or in the case of a spinner card, I often wrap it around the actual like aperture piece as well, but with a jar you don't really want to do that. So I will show you how we're going to wrap this around multiple times. That's why we want the extra length. I'm going to wrap it around multiple times around extra pieces of foam tape that we're going to put on here, to really secure it into position and make it so that they're going to be not necessarily held taut unless you want them to be held taut, but more like they're going to stay in the position that you want them to stay in. They're not going to like sag over time and like completely drop to the bottom of the shaker card or anything. So we just need to find the other piece of invisible thread, which obviously has gone walkabouts. So that one is attached to there. I did have another piece cut, but being invisible, I have lost it. Oh no, it's here. Found it. So I'm just going to put the other piece on that final firefly, and then I will put another piece on the back of that so that we've got all of our fireflies stuck onto our invisible thread. So you can see now how it's hanging, and if you were doing a spinner card, this is kind of how you would make it as well. But I know with this shaker card, we're not going to be putting enough foam tape in there for them to be able to flip to the wrong side, but we don't want any adhesive from this to like accidentally stick to the back of the shaker card. So to prevent that, we're literally just going to take the backing off of this, take one of the extra die cuts. We're actually going to put the glue on the front of the extra die cut, because when you die cut with the gorgeous dies that you get with the coordinating stamps and dies in a stamp club, you get this gorgeous beveled edge. But if we stick them back to back, it's going to make that element thicker because the two bevels will be going the opposite direction, if you know what I mean. So we're going to be sticking the front side to the back side of the other one so that the bevels are sort of going inside each other, so we're not going to be making the element extra thick or anything. So we're just going to place that one on top, make sure it's nicely lined up with the actual main die cut, and then you have your gorgeous firefly that's got a white backing on the back. And if you're doing a spinner card, then you obviously put it the other way around and have another image on the back of it. But I'd never even thought to do a spinner card tutorial. That can definitely be another tutorial further down the line when a stamp club or something lends itself towards that kind of design. So again, put the glue on the front of the extra die cut and then stick this on the back of this one. So this is again sandwiching that invisible thread in there, but also stopping any adhesive, making these stick to the back of the shaker. And then finally we'll do the two for this double one as well. And a bit more glue on the front of this one. And then finally another solid white one on the back of this one as well. Okay, so now we have got our pieces ready. We've got our double firefly there, and one's at an angle underneath it, and then we've got our 2 extra ones as well. So the next step in the process is to take some more 3D foam. So I'm just going to take a length of 3D foam. I will cut this maybe a more generous half for one piece because we've got the extra space up there, and the skinnier half for this piece here. And we're now going to remove the backing off of this and wrap our pieces around so that they will be held into position. I'm really sorry that I'm using invisible thread and you're not going to 100% be able to see what I'm doing, but hopefully by like the hand motion you'll be able to see how I'm kind of wrapping it around. So basically you want to take the backing off, so you've not got a backing on either side, and then you want to sort of eyeball where you want this to go. We'll do this one nearer the top of the shaker, and you're literally just gonna, oops, pulled it off there. You're gonna place it onto the foam tape and then wrap the rest of that invisible thread around, so we're really securing it into place, so it's definitely not going to come unstuck. And then when you've got fed up with wrapping it around, you can just trim off that excess piece. But I don't know if you'll be able to see at all. You can kind of see that it's wrapped around. You can see indents of where the thread has been pulled around it. So you want to do that. And then we'll do all of them for the top, I think, first, and then stick that on. I do usually do this only with like one element, so it's a little bit fiddlier by doing 3 elements in here, but I think it's going to look really good when it's done, so I think it's worth it. But if you're doing this for the first time, you could definitely just put 1 element on here. So make sure those die cuts are nicely stuck back to each other, and then we're going to pull this one in. So if this one is going to sit about there, then we probably want this one to be up higher. So get that invisible thread like that, and then wrap this around a few times again, like so. Oops, I lost the end. Okay, one more. There we go. And I'll just chop off the excess. So we've now got that as our configuration so far. So then we're probably going to want this one to hang down a bit further. So if we get this one, and we'll make it so the firefly sort of hangs nearer that bottom one over there. I'm hoping you really can see what I'm kind of doing. I'm focusing on what I'm doing rather than looking at the camera, but I think you can tell what I'm doing. And it is easier to do in person than you think it might be, because you can actually see what you're doing with your thread. Or if you've got bad eyesight and you can't see the invisible thread very well, then you can just go for like, you know, like a slightly metallic kind of one, like a gold metallic would look nice with the fireflies, or go with whatever metallic you've cut the lid of the jar out of as well. So now we've got all of those onto there. Doesn't particularly matter which way round they are at the moment because they can spin, so we can manipulate which way round they are once we've stuck this down. But now we've got them all on the top piece of foam tape. We want to secure this into place so it makes it easier for us. So we're going to take off, possibly need to take this piece off as well because it's probably going to stick onto that bit because I've used a longer piece of foam tape. But we're just going to take that off, stick it onto the top here. And then we're actually still, again, sandwiching some more of those bits of thread against that other piece of foam tape that was already there. And then you can trim off any excess little bits of thread as well. So we've now got, there we go, you can kind of see them wrapped around that piece of foam tape. And then we've put the extra piece of foam tape on top of the previous one. So this is going to be more of like a 4mm shaker card, but we need that depth with these pieces wiggling around, and we also need that depth if we've got these pieces plus shaker elements in there as well. And actually I might even put a 3rd layer of foam on there just to really make sure it's going to move nicely. And with this being a jar, it doesn't particularly matter that we're making it a very deep shaker card because a jar would be very deep as well. So maybe more of the kind of card that you would want to hand deliver than post though. But I think it's just going to look really lovely as like this extra wiggly around sort of firefly card. So now we need to untangle any of those little threads, and we need to start to attach everything to the bottom piece of foam tape. So we can take the backing off of this piece, and we're just doing the same thing, but we want to really sort of like guesstimate where we're putting this piece of foam tape. So we don't want to particularly pull everything really taut, so you want to leave a little bit of extra gap so that they can wiggle from side to side as well when you're shaking it. So if I pull it taut and the foam tape is about there, but then I just let it go a couple of millimeters and then press it down, and then wrap this around just like we did on the top of it, and then that will be this first one secured, and it'll be a slightly loose shaking little firefly. And I can trim the excess thread. Then this thread is getting in the way because it obviously wants to be next. So now we've got that one like that. Maybe this middle one I will pull more taut because there's two of them on there. It might be better to have it a little bit more taut. So I'm going to press that down, and then when I've got the end back out again, just twiddle that around. I'm going quite quickly to kind of, you know, make this video not be too long, but obviously when you're doing this at home, you can take your time, you don't have to rush, you can, you know, keep double checking and everything as you're working, and make sure they're in the perfect positions that you want them to be in. And then we've just got the third one to do. So now when we pull that piece down, this one is taut and this one is still wiggling. So we'll make this one wiggle as well. So we'll just go, that would be where it is taut, go back a couple of millimeters, press it down, and then wrap it around as well. Well, I do definitely recommend just doing this with one shaker element first. If you've been around a long time, it was one of the stamp clubs, which was like the whale themed one, I think. Or maybe it was the Shaker Creator Pockets, and I'd used that stamp club on it. But anyway, I did one with a whale inside it, and it looked really good as well. So this will work with a lot of different stamp clubs, and you can go for a bigger element rather than tiny little fireflies as well. You don't just have to go for small things. So we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to take the foam tape off of those bottom pieces so it's exposed, and we can stick this piece onto it. So we're going to pull this down, making sure that middle one is still nice and taut and the other two are wiggly like we added them on. And then we can secure any extra end pieces or snip off any extra end pieces. And then we can turn these around because we want them to be facing the opposite direction. And hopefully when we turn this around, you can see how they're going to sort of wiggle, or this one's going to wiggle really nicely because that's slightly looser than the other two. The taut ones in the middle are just going to float there, and then this one is also going to wiggle nicely from side to side as well. So we've got our cute little fireflies in there. Then the next step is to make sure they are all the right way round, and I do think I want to put a third layer of foam tape. So we have to remember at this point we've only put the second layer here and here, so we need to put our third layer or a second layer up the sides. So we can go a second layer of foam tape down there, and then a second layer down this side as well. And when we're raising up this foam tape, we also have to do it along the rest of the card too, so we're not going to have dipping areas. And it might be a different configuration of foam tape when you go up the different layers, depending how you've stuck it on to begin with. And we'll just have an extra little piece to fill in those two gaps there. And I also want to fill in this little gap here because I've left too big of a gap just there. So I want to make sure that nothing will be able to escape from my shaker well. And then that is a decent depth, but I feel like I definitely don't want these to get stuck. So I'm definitely going to go with a third layer of foam tape. So again, we'll take all of these pieces off, and we'll go with a third layer of the 2mm foam tape, or at this point you could just add an extra 1mm with a narrower foam tape if you want to, but I think I will go with the 2mm. And we're just going to run that all the way along and trim off on the bottom, and run it all the way along on this side and trim it off down there. Get a piece that's the rough width of the shaker well, cut that down to a good width, place that on there, cut off any excess, tuck that in, and then do the same here. And this is also securing those invisible threads even more as well. And finally, one more piece to make this a decent level so everything's at the same height. So we've now got our quite thick sort of shaker well with our fireflies in there shaking around. So now we need to make sure these are the right way around. And before we start putting the shaker things in, well, let's finalise our background piece. So this piece of card is the same size as that panel, so I'm probably going to stick it on that sort of position, although I can undercut it if I accidentally put it on wonky. But you know what I said about having this one coming out of the top? I want to make sure there's a trail sort of near the top so it kind of looks like it's coming out. So I think actually there is the perfect position. And then I might as well put a couple of other trails in there too. So maybe have one there and maybe put one down here as well, just to kind of balance it out across the card. So we'll stick these on first. It just gives something in the background, doesn't it? It gives it like a nice layered effect where you can see something stuck on the background, something hovering in front of the background, and then something shaking in there as well. It gives it a different kind of look for a shaker card. Makes it a bit more special as well. Okay, so we've got all of those ready, and it doesn't particularly matter if those are in a perfect position when they go behind, because, you know, does a trail actually attach to the end of a firefly, or is it just floating there in midair? It doesn't really matter 100% where they go, which is nice. So that is going to be our backing panel that we've now got ready. So to finish off this one, I always recommend that you take off the backing tape now. I know some people say they put their elements in and then take the backing tape off, but if I do it that way, I always end up flicking like the shaker well, and then everything jumps onto the tape if I have already put the stuff in there. So I'd rather take the tape backing off and then put my elements in there. And I'm using some of these prills from Tonic. I put them in a different pot because I was rearranging how I was storing all my embellishments and those pots didn't fit in there. So I've got them in a different pot, but these are those prills that they came out with a while ago when they had the flower collections from Susan. Where is my little spoon? There it is. So I'm going to use my little Tonic spoon just to put a couple of spoonfuls of these in. And obviously you can use microbeads, but because I had this yellow colour of prills, and this is a Tonic tutorial, I thought I would go ahead and use these rather than my normal microbeads. So about 2.5 little scoops I've put in there. And then for the confetti, from the Woodland Walk colour trend from years ago, they had these sunset yellow butterflies, so I'm going to put some of those in, because I thought they'd go nicely with like the firefly and bug kind of theme. So we don't need too many of them, just enough to sort of, you know, give a little bit of interest. So, and obviously when the card is standing up, these will sort of fall to the bottom and give that yellow glow, even more of a yellow glow, because all the yellow will sort of be in front of it. So we've got all of our elements in our shaker well, and then the next thing to do is to stick this on top. But sometimes I do like to take a little bit of wet glue and place it around the perimeter of my well, just to make sure we get a really good solid bond on there. So you've got the adhesive of the foam tape and also the wet glue as well, just to make sure, because you don't want all of those little pieces escaping. So we can now place this on. I think I will have to undercut it, so that's fine. And press down around the edge of the shaker well to get a good contact. And then hopefully when we turn this over, we have got our lovely shaker with our moving little fireflies in there wiggling around, or just standing up the right way basically, because isn't it so annoying when you make a shaker card, like for example that whale one I was telling you about. Can you imagine if you've done a shaker card and then the whale is always upside down in it? It's so nice to actually see the elements up the right way, so when you do this kind of technique with the invisible thread, you're always going to get your elements up the right way, which is lovely. So that is that. Then I am going to undercut it because you can see that sort of double edge coming out. I know the foam tape when you've added 3 layers doesn't look that nice, but I feel like the effect that the card gives, you know, I think it's worth having the slightly uglier edges of seeing those 3 layers of foam tape. It does kind of bug me, but I'm not really sure how else you kind of get around that. Unless you sort of made it into a frame, maybe you could do something like this and frame it in a box frame for somebody, and then you wouldn't see the edges of the 3 layers of foam tape on there. But anyway, that is the main portion of our card, and then we want to finish it off. So for the jar, you can definitely colour this if you want to, but because it is like a clear glass jar, I'm just going to leave it as the plain white die cut, because I think that does look quite nice like that. So I'm just going to add adhesive on the back of this and tap off the excess, and then place this straight over that aperture to give it a jar look to it, so it's not just an oval sort of aperture. Although that shape is really nice if you did just want to use that as an aperture. It is a really nice shape, so you definitely could do that as well for a different kind of design. Maybe even have like this way and have a caterpillar walking across the top of the shape or something. But yeah, that's that. Then I want to make sure I remember that I want that firefly flying out the top of the jar, and then we're going to have the lid of the jar down here, so it looks like the lid's come off and the firefly has escaped. Which way do we want the lid? Probably that way, for the perspective of the kind of ellipse of the top of it. So for this, I want to add those with some low profile 1mm foam tape, I think, just to give them a little bit more depth, although I don't think this card really needs much more depth after 3 layers of foam tape. But yeah, I think it's definitely the kind of card you would give to somebody who you see all the time, you know, rather than posting it. Unless you were sending someone a box of goodies, then you could easily put it in there with them. And then we will have the little firefly on the top here with another piece of foam tape. Then that magnifying glass, maybe we could actually put over the top of that firefly. Let's finish mounting the sentiment first to see what we think. So I wasn't sure if anybody was interested in how I do this. I think I have shown it before, but basically I stamp my sentiment, I use my long bladed pair of tonic scissors to cut it into a rectangle, or you can use your guillotine or your trimmer if you'd rather, just whatever you prefer really. And then I just add glue on the back of it, stick it onto whatever colour I want to mat around the edge of it. In this case I'm using yellow to go with the yellow that's on the rest of the card, but you can use glitter card, you could put double-sided behind it and add your own glitter or gilding, anything you want to. And then I'm just using that long blade again to, I sort of go along like a couple millimetres away from the white piece that I have cut, and I don't care if it's not that perfect. I quite like that slightly imperfect look, so I don't worry too much if it's perfect. I find if I tried to make this perfect by trimming it with my guillotine or my trimmer, it always looks worse than if I've just hand cut it, so I do always tend to go for the hand cutting method. And then I was thinking we could just add this onto here, so maybe I don't want to cover too many of the fireflies that are in there. We'll have to do it straight, I think. Straight across the middle, and then that magnifying glass magnifying the one at the top. I do quite like that actually. So for the magnifying glass, I'm going to, because those other elements are on the 3D foam, I'm going to go with the narrow stuff again. Put a little piece on the handle of that, and then I think what I'm going to do is just cut some tiny little slivers and just put them in a couple of places just to hold it up a little bit and you know, make it stick into position. So just some tiny little skinny slivers of foam tape to go around the perimeter of that magnifying glass. And you could even make the magnifying glass a shaker, because you have the inside circle and the outside piece. You could definitely turn the magnifying glass into a shaker. I've done one of my cards that you will have seen in yesterday's video where I've put multiple magnifying glasses on the card, and I was thinking of doing that as a shaker, but then I was like, I think this is a better tutorial to show you. Although a multi-aperture shaker, I don't think I've done a tutorial on that yet. That could be another tutorial for later on as well. But yeah, I think I'm going to put the magnifying glass over the top of that firefly. Just pull off all the tiny little bits of backing tape on there. It doesn't matter that it's not going around the entire perimeter of this. I think just adding a few little pieces will just hold it up to be, you know, a decent height to go over the top of the one that's already raised up, rather than sticking it down flat, because I have put a thin acetate behind the magnifying glass. You can't really have it lower down than the bug that it's over the top of, because I have put acetate in there. So I'll just place that like so, stick that around, and then we'll just put the sentiment across the centre, and again I'll use some foam tape to add that on as well. So because these bits are slightly raised up, because of the extra die cut being on there, I think I'm just going to go like this so it doesn't make it sort of go lumpy over the top of that. So we can take these off and add the sentiment across the middle, and then all we've got to do is stick this onto our card blank. So this has been quite a long tutorial actually. I'm very glad I die cut all of those pieces beforehand, otherwise this would have been even longer, but hopefully it was a useful tutorial for you. Just a kind of different take on a shaker card, because I have done maybe a couple of different shaker cards now for tutorials, but there are so many different types of shaker cards that you can create, so I think it's quite nice to sort of show you all of the different ones, you know, whenever one works with a tonic release or something. So I'll just place that on my card blank. And there we go, we've got our finished shaker card with, what should we call it, suspended elements inside it. I really like how that turned out actually. It's really cheerful with the bright yellow colours, and a really lovely little sentiment as well. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial video in conjunction with Tonic Stamp Club number 29, which is a bug deal, showing you how to create a shaker card with those suspended elements on invisible thread inside there. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again in the next video.